All right, guys. So looking at perspective statements. So this was the work that you did Friday with part 3 of the I Have a Dream speech. And overall, we seem to struggle with it. So I just want to take a minute and look at some of the positive ones that I saw or the strong ones that I saw and kind of tell you what we want to be looking for. All right, so I've got the perspective rubric here. You can see how you need to score, what each score will look like. So the question asked you, what is Dr. King's perspective on the progress of the civil rights movement and what needs to happen next? So the first thing you need to notice was that was asking you 2 questions. So when you think of perspective, you're thinking like his opinion, his viewpoint, his stance, what he thinks about it. So that was green. So I've highlighted that green in the response. And then the second part was what needs to happen next. And so I've highlighted that, the purple, in the response as well. So in this response, it said Dr. King's perspective on the progress of the civil rights movement is that they defaulted on the idea of freedom and that there is still inequality and justice. So that's getting generally to the right answer. We also wanted to be a little bit more specific and talk about how like they haven't come far enough, that there's still more work to do in 100 years, all that kind of stuff. And then what needs to happen next? What needs to happen next is that all men will be equal and no one will be judged by their skin color, by the character, and we will all come together as one. So on this one, even though we had pretty specific language for this first part, the second one is a lot less specific. So what was his actual plan? Like, what does he think? What steps does he say need to happen next for the country? So because of that, that one's going to score an 8. It kind of is a toss-up between this one. This one's pretty specific. This one's not as specific. So on here, we got it an 8 because it was correct. The ideas are all there. It is connected to his central ideas, but their language, especially on this part, isn't quite as specific as we want it to be. So that one would get an 8 out of 10 for the score. All right. Looking at this next one, we're going to pretend that this is called perspective 2. Yay, you guys just gonna watch me and do this real quick. That's a joy. Okay, so going into this one, so perspective example 2. On this one, again, same thing, same color coding. We have Dr. King's perspective on the progress of the civil rights movement is that America has not kept up their promises to people of color. So yes, promises aren't being upheld, hasn't come far enough. Again, I would like that part about how like it hasn't come far or that they've been waiting for forever. And then to answer the second part, what needs to happen next? They need to do something about it in a nonviolent way to bring awareness to it so America will do something about it. I really like this part. I think this answer was probably slightly stronger than this one. They've included the nonviolent, which was a huge theme of his speech, and that they need to do something about it. Like they need to continue with what they're doing. I might have liked this something about it to be a little bit more specific. Especially since it's repeated twice, that more specificity is what will bring it up to a 10 here. So as it stands right now, it's a 9 because everything's correct, everything is there. We just could be a little bit more specific about what we're talking about here. All right, then for our next one, so this one, it says he feels that he has not yet fulfilled justice. So first of all, we want to make sure that we're using complete sentences. So restate the question. So Dr. King's perspective on the civil rights movement is that we have not yet fulfilled justice, something like that. And then what needs to happen next? They need to spread freedom throughout the country. The ideas here are right. Like, yes, it hasn't been fulfilled. Yes, they want to spread more freedom throughout the country, but we're not really connecting. If you look at the 7, the connection's limited. It's not really tying into all the ideas that he talked about in his speech. So it's really just referring to some parts of it. And the language here is super general. I could pick this phrase up and not necessarily know what speech or what text you're talking about. So just making sure you're thinking about that as you put together your answer. However, they did answer both parts of the question. Most of the responses I saw didn't. So I love that both parts were answered here. They are technically answered correctly. We just want to make sure that we're thinking more about connecting to the entire text, not just pieces of the text. All right, so that is how we score. I would score those 3 answers.